And I think that's why we become accountants, or we become engineers or philosophers or something like anything like that. I have been reinforced by that first kind of notion that Timothy's bird is really, really something special. And I followed that muse for actually my whole life. And sometimes it hasn't been exactly comfortable to follow it, but as my mentor once said, I'm probably an artist by default because I can't even think of what else I can do, even though I've done a lot of things, but I've been very unhappy doing them. So I am probably an artist by default. I feel most at one with it, and I have felt that way ever since I was a young child. And it's continued on, and now here I am. I'm in my advanced middle age, and I feel even freer, actually, because I don't have to go and stress about what is the going mood or the going thing, the marketing kind of thing. What I do is I simply follow, as I always have, I've always followed my muse. And as soon as one thing seems to come to an end, like there was a time when I was doing the arches of the Southwest in Utah and New Mexico, and I would draw a lot out there, wander around in the desert, and feel totally full. I'd come back to my studio in St. Paul or Minneapolis, and I'd paint those things, and it was sort of like taking a mini vacation. It was sort of like I'd be right back there. But of course, paintings of arches and the desert don't really market or sell that well in Minnesota. What people want to see in their paintings is something I probably could go into, but I'd rather not. So that's the way I paint it. And now I am really involved with these sculpture vessels, or as I call them, spirit vessels. And the story behind them is that I was married and involved with a woman for 30 years. And she had had enough of me after our son left home. And we had joint custody of our dog. And I was living in St. Paul. I got this loft, which was a wonderful opposite of the apartment that I thought I'd have to move into and so forth. And we had joint custody of our dog, and I'd be very, very depressed going back to Minneapolis, picking up Tessie, my dog, and we'd drive along the river, and every time we'd come around Hidden Falls, I mean, she would perk up and she would just be alive, kind of thing. So, I mean, I had problems with depression. I'd go down to the water and I'd throw sticks in the water, and I'd just throw more and more sticks in the water. Tessie didn't care anything about the current or anything like this. She would just go after him, after him. And I'd sit and draw, and I'd write in my journal and throw sticks. And when I got sick of throwing sticks, Tessie would put her head underwater and she'd pull up stones. I always called her a rock terrier. Anyway, my spirits would rise. So I started taking some of those sticks that I threw into the water back with me to my studio. And I started sticking them into various places and creating a kind of an armature. And they became very crafty, and you couldn't warm your peas up in them or anything like that. If you wanted that sort of thing, you'd go to Target. But these actually seemed, I put paper mache around them, so the only thing that they really could hold is spirits, my spirits. So I called them spirit vessels, and that's been some years now, and now the spirit vessels have become really complex, and now they're very political, and there's been little jaunts along the way and so forth, but basically the original idea, and they still are, you know, when you take a walk, you take a little hike, and you find something like a feather or maybe somebody that you lost an earring. They're never going to find it, but it's very attractive, and you go, you fiddle with it, and you say, well, you know, and you continue on your journey, and all of a sudden there's no place to put this. So I have a way of thinking that they belong in this opening at the top of my vessels, that you just drop them in, and they are spiritually active forever after. And like I said, the vessels have become quite sophisticated. More and more of it is less instinct, and more is the formal elements of art and the principles of art, but they still hold that same kind of power for me. So now I have shows of my work and so forth. So, and that's another aspect. All the original crafts, like excuse me, spirit vessels, have been sold, and they're all gone. And to a certain extent, sometimes I feel like going back and picking up some of those branches, those things I reacted to out in the forest or out in the mountains, and sort of putting them in there. I still am to a certain extent, but they've become quite sophisticated. The paintings that have been recorded are trees. The tree is the highest plant on the evolutionary scale. Like human beings are the highest plant or the highest being on the animal scale. So the tree becomes me. It's a metaphor for myself, and I've used it before. I've used a VW car for myself, and lately, within the past 3 or 4 years, I've used the tree as a metaphor for myself and my relationships with other people, specifically a girlfriend of mine. And when I'm away from her, I have a tendency to think of us as a couple of trees that are interacting through the nature of the cosmos. And